Great. Good evening and welcome to the Audit Committee of the Rochester City School District Board of Education. At this point in time, I'll entertain a motion to call the Audit Committee meeting to order. So moved. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. The meeting has been called to order. The first item on the agenda is to entertain any speakers that are addressing the Audit Committee's agenda. I've been informed that there are no speakers tonight, so with that said, we'll move on to our next agenda item, and this is, I'll need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the matter related to the employment of a particular individual.
Second.
Can I get all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you, and we will reconvene from executive session shortly. the Audit Committee of the Whole. And with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the October 5th, 2021 Audit Committee of the Whole minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the minutes have been approved, thank you. Okay, so moving along, we're moving to resolutions. Moving along to item number 4 is resolution consideration. And the first resolution we have is the appointment to CSE, CPSC, resolution number 2021-22297. Can I get a motion for that
So
resolution?
moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the resolution has been approved. Next resolution is the appointment.
Mr. Chairman, are we voting electronically or digitally?
I can. We're moving a little bit fast for me to click the buttons,
Okay.
but if you want me to...
Whatever works for the chairperson. Huh?
Yeah, whatever works for you.
I will open them live, so just go a little bit slower when you do
I'll let
discussion, and now open them live. For those on the Zoom, just vocally say your vote, and I will do your online vote.
Okay. So what are you going to do online?
Talia, can y'all hear us?
We can. We can.
We
Very
cannot
loud,
see
very,
you.
very
We
low.
cannot see you.
Oh, no, you won't be able to see me because the camera only pans out to the whole board, but we can see
We
you and
can't
we
see
can...
the board. We're only looking at each other, whoever is on, camera's on at the Zoom room.
Okay, give us 1 second to make sure that the
All
board
right,
is...
thank you.
Okay. Are you able to see us now?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes.
All right, great. So we're going to go, Commissioner Clark, you can go ahead with Resolution 298.
Okay, moving along, we have Resolution 298, which is the appointment to the administrative tenure area. Any discussion regarding this resolution? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, at this point in time, all in favor?
Aye.
You should be able to vote electronically.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion has carried. Next is Resolution 299, appointment to the acting position listed. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Discussion? Any discussion on Resolution 299? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved. Now we have a walk-on resolution, and that's resolution number 300.
1 quick second, I'm so sorry. Commissioner Adams, I haven't collected your vote yet.
You're
Okay.
muted.
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, great. We have a walk-on resolution, and that's resolution number 300. And it's a resolution to assign to the someone to the interim position. Can I have a motion for this resolution?
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Mr. Clerk? I was going to raise my
Absolutely.
hand, but I don't know if you can see the screen. We're a little bit further than we usually are. Can I just wanted
Yes.
to put this on record. Thank you. I just wanted to put it on record that, you know, this is a position, even though it says acting, it is $105,000, and the board just approved a second position for $80,000 at North Star for a principal and vice principal, where it has been historically a director person, and that currently there are 20 students or less attending every single day. And this is in the context of the administration presenting to this community school closures. So I just wanted to put that on record, and certainly we'll potentially do a live to talk about what school closures means and what these votes mean and what the context of this means. But certainly we don't know where the funds are going to come from for long-term support for these positions, and that ARP are not appropriate ways to spend in dollars, and the state has been very clear to this board and to this district that we are not to use temporary COVID dollars for long-term expenditures. Thank you. I just wanted that on record.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Any others, Commissioner Powell?
Yes, if the superintendent would like to redirect this question to anyone. While it was described to us that the ARP dollars would be used initially to fund this, when you think about the financing of special ed programs, I know that we get extraordinary aid for certain kinds of special needs students. I know that one of the reasons that outside programs like Norman Howard are as expensive as they are is because they have a low staff to student ratio, or student to staff ratio. Can you describe to me how those financial dynamics would play out in the long term?
I'm going to ask Acting Chief Desiree Richmond to respond.
Is this on?
Oh,
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Great. So you are correct. It is a lower to student to teacher ratio, staff ratio, because of the nature of the students in some of those specialized programs. And the lower the ratio, the higher the increase the cost, obviously, but we can also stack those. So it is reimbursement provided by the state, and we get a pretty good amount back of it. At least 85% of it is reimbursed to the district. And I wanted to say that, you know, covering these positions are covered through the current budget. There's no ARP money being used for those positions. We do have many vacancies in the district, and we are reallocating some of the funding to cover the positions, but we also have a vacant director of special education that is going towards that funding as well.
Thank you.
President White, you had a question?
Yes. While I can certainly appreciate and hold up our role as fiduciary agents for this district and the importance of making sure that every dollar is accounted for and that it is spent judiciously, we are also charged with being educational leaders for our most vulnerable citizens, including those with special needs. And it is unfair and inappropriate to hold us to spend the same dollars that we spend on students who don't have challenges for students who do have challenges. And so the ratio of a caring adult to a child with needs is going to be different necessarily, because some of our children have serious challenges when it comes to learning. Having said that, doesn't mean that we shouldn't monitor with care and precision how we are spending that money. But make no mistake about it, these children, our most vulnerable children at North Star, would have a very, very difficult time if put in the educational setting that most of our students are at. That is not an option for these students if we truly care about their future. And so I intend on voting in support of this resolution, with this one caveat, that the superintendent and her staff bring before this Board of Education as soon as possible a plan that describes that, notwithstanding the fact that the student-adult ratio is in favor of the student, but a plan that describes why that ratio is the way it is and how you plan on making sure that we maximize every adult that's put before those children in that setting. And I would ask that our Vice President and our Chair of ESA, or I think that is probably the most appropriate place for this presentation to land, I would ask that Vice President Elliott consider, as soon as possible, having that acting, with the permission, of course, with the superintendent, having that acting principal, if he is so appointed today, to appear before ESA, Equity and Student Achievement, and make a presentation about that plan, that specific plan, how we're going to grow that program. Again, not to necessarily exactly match the contractual requirements in our normal education setting, but how you will maximize those adult resources to make sure those very vulnerable citizens or students get the services that they need. So, thank you.
Vice President Elliott?
Thank you, Chairman Clark. We have to make sure that we're balancing the programs that we need, as well as the funding for it. You know, over the last few years, we've been in a financial mess, to say that lightly. And so, you know, how do we, you know, we're talking about 20 kids, and we're talking about a vice principal, we're talking about acting principal. And so, and certainly this program is expensive, but at the same time, you know, Commissioner LeBron is the chair of the finance department, so she's going to ask these very poignant questions, and she should ask these poignant questions. Where are we getting the money from? And to her point, you know, we've been told not to use temporary dollars for these kinds of programs. And so we just have to be mindful, because I tell you, as we move forward, you know, this board has a responsibility to make sure that our finances are in, we have a healthy financial position, we have a balanced budget. And so in the future, you may be getting pushback on these things. If you can't come, letting us know where we're going to find the permanent dollars for these kinds of programs, or the question becomes, should we have these programs? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner LeBron, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wrote down some points. I certainly don't disagree with President White that we do have an obligation to support all of our students, especially our most need students. We should be then questioning why the administration hasn't had a plan up until this point to find out where the 45 plus missing students from North Star who are not attending day to day, where they at? What's the outreach? It's December. They haven't been coming since September. We should all be concerned about that. I certainly do not think ever in any situation that supporting a school means adding more management versus actual supports for the staff and the students in that direct level service. You know, and then ARP, that came from the administration. I wrote notes, so I didn't just pull that out of a hat. I specifically asked where we were going to get the sum difference from a director to a principal, and then you're adding a vice principal, so you're creating 2 layers of management, again, for less than 20 students. And certainly we should all have that empathy for our most vulnerable students, but that cannot be uplifted while we have also minimized the special needs students from GEM at 29, and the disregard for moving them and saying, hey, we need to close this school and shut down this program because we're going to ignore that they too have high special needs, and that we're just going to ignore them to uplift one particular population. And I'm not pinning school against school. I'm just saying the administration And certainly this board cannot say that we care about these kids and then ignore some of the proposals that are coming down that are going to impact other kids who are also equally facing challenges. But certainly, you know, whatever expenditures we're paying, we're still missing 45 plus students. We don't know where they're at. And I want that on record. We don't know where they're at. But here we are adding a principal and a vice principal in the same context that we're still having conversations about school closures, and we're still missing 45 plus students. That's all for me. It's going to be a no, obviously, but I just want to put all that on record today. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Myers-Smalls, would you like to make a comment or remarks?
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. The only thing I'll say is that Commissioner LeBron is accurate. We are still trying to locate some students who certainly have been disengaged. There is regular interventions that we put forward to find them, and it's not as easy as just saying, okay, well, the students aren't here, so we're going to drop them from the rolls. We are actively looking to re-engage students who in part were disengaged because of COVID or just for other reasons. We know that some of our scholars also, particularly during COVID, did go and get jobs, and so we are trying to connect with them. In some instances, we don't have an accurate phone number, so there is outreach going on. I just don't want it to be thought that we have these students who are not attending school and efforts aren't being made to work to connect with them. So that's all I'll add at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any additional comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will move on to the vote. All in favor of Resolution 300, please signify by saying aye and voting electronically.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
Nay.
Abstain?
Vote two.
Commissioner
Okay.
Adams is a nay as well.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, the resolution passes 5-2.
Could I ask, Mr. Chair, that Commissioner Adams speak for himself? Could he reiterate for the...
He did speak.
I'm sorry, but this is Commissioner Adams's vote. I'd like to hear from Commissioner Adams, and I think our
Oh my God,
audience
go
would
ahead,
like...
Ricardo.
So, again, I'm a no. Kaya, did you get that?
I did get that, Commissioner
Yeah,
Adams.
thank you, Commissioner Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the audit report, and we do have Catherine Barrett from Freed Maxit with us today. She's one of the external auditors, and she will be reviewing the final results with the board now. Thank you.
Well, there are two things I do.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Am I green or? Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to update two items. Number one, I did want to communicate that in our financial statements that we have had early implementation of GASB 98. If you, the board recalls, last year I had mentioned that I did read that it was considered a racial slur and objectionable to use the CAFR as what we call our financial statements. Therefore, you will note it is called the AFR now.
Yeah.
That is actually a GASB. That does change the name, so I did want to make sure it was not a typo. We intentionally did change the name so that we're not offensive to anyone. So I did want to note that there was the early implementation that was performed. In addition, I do want to make sure I recognize in our financial statements, we have not performed our single audit, once again, similar to last year. With our relief funding, we are waiting for the proper guidance to perform that work, and it's likely in the first quarter of the year that that work will be performed. So that is going to be delayed. After that, let me go on to Ms. Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I put together just a few slides for your presentation. The audit went fairly smoothly this year. The opinion letters were not included in your draft, but they have been provided to management, yes.
Would it be possible for you to tip the microphone or otherwise let it capture your voice a little better? Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
Okay, thanks.
The opinion letters have been provided to management for inclusion in the final report. We're happy to say that we have an unmodified opinion again this year on the APRA, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide in any audit. It means that there's no material misstatements in your financial statements and you follow all generally accepted accounting principles. We do have a qualified opinion on the extracurricular report. That's consistent with previous years because we did find that there was a lack of internal controls over the cash receipt from certain information. So when we started the audit, we had an audit plan that was developed based on the results of our audit from previous years, talking with management regarding the transactions that occurred this year, to identify any unusual transactions, unusual revenue sources, to identify if there was any changes to our audit plan. I'm happy to say that we did not have to change our audit plan during the audit, which means that we didn't identify any unusual or questionable transactions. We were able to fulfill that plan. We did become aware during our audit that the district failed to submit its application for the contract for excellence. Very fortunately, that did not impact you receiving the aid. You still receive the aid, and we have verbal assurances from the State Education Department that there will be no clawback of that revenue as a result of failing to file the application. And that's about $29 million.
Are you taking questions as we go, or shall I save my question?
No, I can take questions.
Okay, so the assurances that you received from the state, isn't it as much because the entire funding formula and contract for excellence rollout had been suspended? And I mean, isn't that some of the rationale on the state's behalf?
I can't speak to that per se. It is included as part of your general aids, and so you received the full allocation of your general aids. Apparently, the failure to complete the application and the other required steps does not impact the receipt of that. I was somewhat surprised because they require us to do certain agreed upon procedures over that funding source to make sure that you're spending it the way that it's intended to be spent. We know that a draft of the letter has been prepared by the Education Department, and it's been elevated to the appropriate parties. We're just waiting for response, and we feel much more comfortable having that in writing rather than verbal assurances. But the people that we've talked to, that we've received the verbal assurances from, we feel fairly confident from.
Right. Oh, I thank you, and I just wanted to get clarification on that because the district's failure isn't the only failure involved. I mean, the state has, in breach of contract, I mean, this is a contract for excellence, and in fact, the state has been in breach of contract for a number of years for failing to live up to the increased foundation aid that is built right in the legislation.
This is separate from foundation aid.
No, I understand that, but it was passed as, I mean, the whole contract for excellence came into being as part of the rollout of the new foundation aid, and if we were to talk to any member of the state legislature, and I were to say that they are in breach of contract, they would argue with me about that too.
Commissioner Powell,
but that doesn't.
if you could just speak a little closer to the mic. I'm understanding people can't hear you very well.
I don't really need to repeat myself because it's more a political question than it is a financial one. But the fact is that the contract, the new foundation aid formula that went into place in 2007 as a matter of law was never fulfilled by the state, and nor was it repealed. nor was the contract for excellence requirements repealed, even though there was no new money coming by virtue of rollout of the formula, because the formula had been frozen for some time. So it is a political question, not a financial question. I just wanted to get some clarity about if you had any to offer about the state's position regarding our lack of reporting. So thank you.
You're welcome. So next we get into some financial highlights. And you have to understand that included in your AFR are two sets of financial statements on two different bases of accounting. The first two statements are what we call the government-wide financial statements, and that includes all long-term liabilities and long-term assets of the school district. The second set of financial statements are what we call your fund basis financial statements, and that has a much more short-term perspective. So when you look at the two, if you think of your fund basis as looking at your personal finances, and during the year, as a result of the end of the year, were your revenue and expenses consistent to what your personal budget was? And were you able at the end of the year to add money to your savings? Alternatively, if you look at your government-wide financial statements, that speaks more to your net worth, because it includes all of your long-term assets and liabilities, such as your mortgage and your long-term, the ownership of your home and businesses. So if you try to think of it in that perspective, you budget for and finance on a short-term perspective. So while you're required under government auditing, general accepted government auditing standards to include the government-wide perspective, really your interest is on more the fund basis financial statements. But when we talk about government-wide, your liabilities and deferred inflows exceeded your assets and deferred outflows by $638 million. That's a decrease in your net worth, but there are some very long-term liabilities, such as your participation in the state retirement system, as well as your long-term or other post-employment benefits that have a significant impact on those numbers. And when you talk about the retirement system, those numbers can swing significantly, as we saw this year with the teachers' retirement system. Last year, it was overfunded by about 102%. This year, because of when that was measured, which was right at the height of the pandemic, now it's underfunded. So there can be huge swings that have a significant impact on your government-wide financial statements. But your net position did decrease by $14.7 million. And again, you think about that's a decrease in your net worth. So the next page really talks about how do you get from a positive increase in your fund balance, which is positive cash flow. You added about $400,000 to your savings per se, and what numbers impacted you to get to a deficit of 14.7, and you made capital improvements on your buildings of $10.1 million. You decreased the long-term debt by $69 million. Alternatively, you did increase the long-term pension liability by 31.9, and you had an increase in your OPEB liability of 62.3 million. So that's kind of how we get from a positive increase in your fund balance to a negative impact on your government-wide financial statements. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So the next couple pages talk about your fund basis financial statements, which is really what you're interested in. And the result of your financial operations, you resulted in a surplus in your general fund of $53.3 million, increasing the fund balance to $135.8 million. And much of this is due to the impact of the pandemic. The savings that you had on the expenditure side outpaced the decreases we saw on the revenue side. leading to the fund balance. So obviously, that's a very temporary endeavor, a result of, you had positive financial results of a very negative situation, unfortunately. But some of this comes at a cost, future cost to you, specifically the transportation. You obviously did not spend everything that you budgeted for transportation because you didn't transport a majority of the students for a large part of the year. There is a delay in the aid that you receive on those transportation expenses. So while you didn't have the cost this year, you're going to see that the aid is going to be significantly reduced next year when your costs elevate themselves to the normal. And you have budgeted for that in your 21-22 budget, and you've basically taken some of the positive financial results and you've balanced your budget to kind of offset that loss of revenue into the 21-22 fiscal year. And overall, your total fund balance represents about 9.8% of the 21-22 budget. And the next screen gives you kind of a history of your general fund balance, and also compares you to other of the big 5 school districts and what their percentage of the budget is built into total fund balance, as well as what we call your unassigned fund balance, which is the fund balance you have no restrictions from. One item that did significantly impact your unassigned fund balance is the fact that you did have a significant prepayment to the charter schools. And again, that's just a timing issue. But if you think of fund balance as a pie, the more you have in one area of fund balance, the non-spendable shrinks the other slices of the pie. If you had not had such a big increase in the non-spendable portion, that would have fallen to the unassigned portion, lack of any injection of the board to restrict those monies, and you would have been at an unassigned fund balance of about 30% of the next year's budget. So with the very positive results that you had not only this year but in last year, this next page kind of gives you a history of how you've used some of those excess funds to fund not only some restrictions but also some committed fund balance and assignments of fund balance, which all have different levels of authority to fund and use those funds. Any question on any of these categories or how you use those monies? And then the last slide is really just a budget to actual analysis, as well as a prior year to current year analysis. So you can see how you did comparison to your budget, where you had a balanced budget, and you see the increase in fund balance of $53 million compared to $75 million last year, as well as the impact budget to actual in prior year to current year. Some of the highlights within the other funds contained in your AFR, special aid fund, which is where you record all of your federal, state, and local grants. You had about $97.3 million in grants in the current year compared to $119 million. Some of that is based on the pandemic and the reduction of funding because students were not in school. Your lunch fund had an operating deficit this year of $1.3 million. That's in comparison to the 2.2 in the previous year. Capital fund, you had about $18.4 million in expenditures this year. Again, that's outside of what the FMP does, so that's just the normal maintenance and repairs necessary for your school buildings. and then the debt service fund is where you have funds that pay for the necessary debt service payments of the district in any fiscal year. That's kind of the summary of the finances. Any questions on the finances?
I wanted to see if anyone had, I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to give my fellow commissioners an opportunity to ask questions first. Are there any questions?
Yeah. So, I think technically speaking, correct, but for example, this school lunch fund, you state operating deficit in the current year of 1.3 million funded by a transfer from general fund. There's probably a transfer on the books from general fund, but we also had, at the beginning of the 2021 fiscal year, an assigned fund of 3 million, which was then another transaction in October of this year was made to our current school lunch assigned fund is $1.7 million now, but it seems that somewhere along the way, the fund was completely swiped and then restored to 1.7 million in order for this statement to be true. The entire 3 million was put back into general fund, corrected the deficit that you identify, and then by virtue of board resolution, the school lunch fund was restored back to $1.7 million. What I'm trying to call out to you all is there are mechanical difficulties with the way that this district is managing assigned funds on a daily basis. That is to say, the school lunch fund should never have been corrected by way of the transfer from general fund when there was an assigned fund to do the job. A resolution should have been presented to us early on asking for a transfer from the assigned fund. So there's some mechanical difficulties with the way that our administration is managing those funds that would be easily corrected on a procedural basis. So I can see how your statement is technically correct, but when I look at how we got there, like it shouldn't have happened this way. That's all.
Thanks. Are there any other questions before I move on? I do have a couple of questions. The first one deals with the prepayment of the charter school
Yes.
paid in June instead of July, which understated our unrestricted fund for the year. Now, is it your recommendation that we wait until July 1st, since that's the first day of the next fiscal year, as opposed to June 30th?
I mean, it's reported as a prepayment, so it doesn't impact your overall financial results. It really just impacted the classification of fund balance as non-spendable versus unassigned.
Okay, so that basically caused a larger variance for the year.
It does, but as soon, that prepayment, if it goes back to, usually that's about $400,000.
Right.
So next year, if you do not prepay that, the non-spendable goes back to that $400,000, and that flows down to unassigned fund balance, failing any other action by the board.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. My other question really deals with the fact that you indicated we did get a qualified opinion as it related to our extracurricular school activity,
Yes.
extra classroom activities. I know that seems to be a recurring type of issue. It came up last year, and I probably came up the year before that. Are you seeing any improvement in the schools tracking these funds, or are you seeing the same thing year after year without improvement?
I can tell you that last year we saw some improvement. This year, because there was so little activity, the activity went from about $250,000 revenue and expense, inflow and outflow, to less than $60,000 this year. And not necessarily all the students were in school, so there was some lacking signatures, student records, the financial records that are supposed to be maintained by the students. Those were not provided to us. I can't tell you that they were maintained or not, but they weren't provided to us for audit. So it's really hard to answer your question, given the lack of activity in comparison to previous years, because we didn't do that same level of testing for us to be able to say whether you improved or not. But I know that we did see improvement in last year's audit report, because I did go back and revisit that. And I know that the district does continuing education to try to improve the internal controls in this area. And it is a very hard area. Not every school receives an unqualified opinion. There's many schools, some accounting firms, they do nothing but issue a qualified opinion in this area, because there's so many things working against having good internal controls. But it is a high-risk area, because you're dealing with students, you're dealing with a lot of cash, and you're dealing with advisors that, this is not their primary business.
Right.
So there's a lot of risk there. That's why they insist that we do a separate audit of the extracurricular funds.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. And before, I thank you for a thorough presentation, and I want to thank Anissa also for her hard work. But before we dismiss you, I want our commissioners to know that you do have an option to move into executive session with the external auditor if you wish to, but if not, we will move on.
I do have a couple of slides regarding the report to management.
Okay, great, and thank you.
Would you like me to continue on those
Yes,
slides?
you can
Okay.
continue, and then the commissioners will let me know.
Okay. So you also receive a report to the board that contains some required communication under auditing standards. It talks about our responsibilities under professional standards, and that was all outlined in our engagement letter. Talks about changes in accounting practices. So you did adopt GASB 84 this year, which changed how fiduciary activities are reported. It took some activities that used to be reported as fiduciary activities and moved them into your general fund. That's why you saw some new items within the restricted fund balance. You also did, as Anissa commented, adopt GASB 98 early. But as far as significant or unusual transactions or alternative treatments, we did not see any. We did identify one audit adjustment this year, but I'd have to say that it was an isolated incident. It was a fairly unique item and had to do with some ARPA funding that you received and how that was reported by the district at the onset, and how those funds were to be spent, and timing issue. There was no changes in management judgments or the estimates that are included in your financial statements, and we encountered no difficulties during the audit. We do have a communication of a couple of other matters. The first one we talked about was just the contract for excellence. And then here is a summary of the findings that we had with regard to the extracurricular activities. Most of them are repeat findings, with the exception of that some of the student ledgers were not provided to us for audit. And I think that the lack of signatures on disbursement orders was also a new item this year. That's it for my presentation.
Great, thank you. Since I didn't receive a motion for executive session, which really is just an option, what I'd like to do at this point in time is turn it over to Anissa so that she can give us some feedback on some things.
Anybody want to go into executive session? Probably should. It's not with us at these moments, but.
Well,
Okay.
okay.
So I did want to just touch on a couple of things. I have worked with CFO Pierce, and her organization is working on the other matters in the control environment as it relates to the two findings that will appear in the management letter. They're improving. The second area, the board members, we had almost 30 questions that were asked and answered by the finance organization. That is uploaded in the board docs. You guys can look at those, and to the extent there are outstanding questions or clarifications required, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask that you would prepare questions and forward them to me by this Friday, so administration has enough time to go through those questions and clarify any answers you have remaining. Please understand, we do need to get to the point of the final document, so if you do send questions, we'll give them some time to respond so that we can get the final document. We do have to approve this document at our December business meeting because we have to file the document by the 1st, and the turnaround is very, very small. So I just wanted to make sure that I outlined those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I had a
Chairperson,
motion for executive session. Second?
Chairperson Clark, my understanding, and I could clearly be corrected by any one of my colleagues, the purpose for executive session in this context is if the Friedmaxic wanted to discuss some matters with us in confidence that they didn't feel could be in the public space, or board members had questions that they needed to have answered in executive session. I didn't hear anybody say that they had questions. Oh, you did? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were calling to see if there were any questions, but you had one yourself. Oh, you have one yourself? Okay.
Great. So we will adjourn to executive session, and we'll reconvene.
I move for it.
Excuse me, Chairperson. I don't see a grounds to move into executive session on this unless you need the advice of counsel.
Well,
No.
the comments and review of the auditor are privileged, and we are allowed to discuss those questions and answers in executive session, as I understand it.
I would just like to add, Education Law 2116C does allow for that to take place.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right.
I just want to add, because our hands are raised over here too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just want to add though to that also the superintendent, this is one of those executive sessions where the superintendent doesn't necessarily need to be there, especially if the external auditor wanted to have a conversation with the board. This has come up before when I was the chair of audit with a previous superintendent wanting to be there, and there was some back and forth, but this is the board's opportunity, time to have with the external auditor for any potential warnings or any things that we should be mindful of what the administration may be doing. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. And Commissioner Adams.
So is there any issue with me being there, though? Okay.
Commissioner Adams, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did. I had my hand. I had my hand. I need to use my personal point of personal privilege here. I'm sitting here and it just don't sit well with me. That people don't hear. Let me say this here. I voted no because something was told and said that was turned around and flipped later on. It said funding was coming from ARPA, then it was said different. And there was so many other people heard the same thing. That's the reason I voted no. But my issue is, don't question whether or not I voted on something. If and no other commissioners I know everybody heard me vote. Commissioner Powell, please leave me out of that stuff. Leave me out of that. I'm not feeling well, and I'm not going to sit back and accept that. Nobody said anything when that lady changed her where the funding came from. Nobody said anything, but that's the reason I voted no. If you need to know, and so with that, I'm clear. I'm telling you that I'm not in the mood. I'm gonna start calling this stuff out, man. I'm done. Thank you, Commissioner Clark.
You're welcome. Thank you, Commissioner Adams.
Permission to respond? I wasn't intending to call you out, Commissioner Adams, at all, but it is your vote, it is not Commissioner LeBron's vote, and I hadn't heard your vote any more than the clerk had heard your vote. So it wasn't Commissioner LeBron's place to speak for you. That's all. That's the only point I was trying to make, and I wanted to hear from you, as I believe the clerk had to hear from you, not Commissioner LeBron, to know what your vote is. Thank you.
I would like to respond too, because the clerk could also speak for herself and say she didn't hear the vote. I heard Commissioner Adams' vote, as did other folks who especially are on the Zoom, because we clearly can hear each other much faster than maybe you all can hear us out there. And so I just wanted to reiterate in case his nay was not heard. But our clerk also is an adult and capable of speaking for herself. So I wasn't speaking for Commissioner Adams, just clarifying for the record that he also voted nay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had a motion for executive session. We didn't have a second, and we didn't have a vote. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. We will move to executive session and reconvene shortly.
We're also going to go in this room over here. Is that what we're going to do?
And at this point in time, I will accept a motion to forward the ACFR to the December 23rd, 2021 business meeting.
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, the motion.
Wait 1 second. We have to hear from the folks online. I wasn't able to hear them very clearly.
Aye.
Oh, there he is. Okay, if you can do a roll call. Commissioner LeBron?
Aye.
Commissioner Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Malloy?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. We just need them a little bit louder. Thank you.
Okay, great. The motion carried and the ACFR will be forwarded. With that, I would like to turn a brief minute over to our Auditor General and so to Anissa. So-
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to mention, some people actually outsource the creation of their financial statements, and I did want to just formally thank Carrie Couples for the time and labor. She actually did put this document together, and she does every year, and it goes through many painstaking days and nights trying to get this document together and going through many, many versions of edits from everyone. So I did want to just formally thank Carrie for the work on putting together this ACFR. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Carrie. We do appreciate the work. And Anissa, you always do an outstanding job also. And I want you to know I really appreciate everything you do to support this audit function. With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, we're adjourned. So I guess we turn it over to policy now.
Yes, it did, indeed, thank you. The agenda for the policy committee is before you. Can I have a motion to approve this agenda?
One quick second. I just need 2 seconds to flip over from one meeting to the next.
Okay.
One second. I'm sorry about that.
And anyone who's online, if they want to go on to Board Docs in the board and log in so that your vote can be recorded electronically if you have that capacity.
She has to make the meeting live for us to do that.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
While she's doing that, I'll just indicate that although we have no speakers, we have a very long list of individuals who've submitted comments. They are posted to Board Docs. There, in fact, are 186 comments, all but one of them is on the question of transportation.
Okay, the meeting is now live. If folks want to join online, and the agenda is on the screen as well.
Okay. All right, so motion to approve this agenda,
So moved.
approved by President White, seconded by Commissioner Elliott, Vice President Elliott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just giving the electronics a chance to catch up. As already indicated, we do not have any speakers. I don't anticipate us going into executive session because we already had that opportunity.
We have an executive session at the end of policy.
Very good. So, item 4, the review and acceptance of the minutes from October 5th.
So moved.
I have a motion from President White.
Second.
Second from Vice President Elliott. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone else on the Zoom?
I'm on the Zoom, I'll say aye, but I'm trying to find it on Board Docs to pop up on the screen to vote, and I don't see it popping up.
Oh, try and refresh one more time. I have all the other votes are in except for yours.
Not mine either. I don't see it.
Yours as well is also pending.
I think I got it in, Kalia.
Yeah, yours is
There's
now
just a
in.
delay,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I actually didn't see the pop-up. Did you vote for me?
I went ahead and voted since you're moderating.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the motion carries?
Motion carries
So
7-0.
The minutes from October 5 have passed. Thank you. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I still have the audit committee in front of me. Hold on, let me.
That's just October 5th. We didn't do
Yeah,
that
wait
in
a
the second.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is 5A. Oh,
One-
I'm sorry, we only approved one set of minutes, didn't we?
Right.
All right, the next set of minutes is November 5th.
November 2nd.
I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Always do that. Rats.
We have all our votes in, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Commissioner Adams, if you want to just do your verbal vote, I'll go ahead and take yours electronically as well. Okay, I see you nodding, thanks.
Okay. All right. The first discussion topic item is the Bilingual Education Council's bylaws. We did promise them that we would attend to this at our last meeting. I, for one, have reviewed those bylaws, as has the superintendent, and we have some questions on that.
And I just want to highlight that they have joined us on Zoom, so they welcoming them to the policy committee. Thank you so much for waiting and for joining us. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Thanks, good evening.
Ms. Garcia, thank you for attending. Okay. So, do we want to have a discussion about the bylaws?
Commissioner Powell,
Go ahead, please, Commissioner Elliott.
yeah, and am I pronouncing it, Devith, is that how you pronounce the person who's representing BEC? Just want to make sure I got the name. Angelica is there.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm here. I think if we're going to speak to the council parents, you guys should find a translator. They prefer to communicate in Spanish.
We have someone who will do that. Thank you.
So the Commissioner Powell and I was having a discussion around BEC will be provided 2 seats at the Parent Leadership Advisory Committee.
So you're going to have to take it in chunks so Medisol can translate.
Okay.
But before start translating, can we just ask for the pronunciation correctly? Si tú no puedes decir cómo se dice tu nombre, Ms. Garcia, ¿cómo tú quieres que yo te llame?
Diveth.
Diveth, ok. Para que ellos sepan cómo tú sabes. Gracias. Diveth, Vice President Elliott.
Thank
but
you.
you'll have a translator. You're welcome.
So we probably need to have some discussion with regard to point number 7 under Article 2A. So 2A, point 7, BEC will be provided 2 seats at the Parent Leadership Advisory Council and the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. So, Madam Superintendent, I would like to, if you can respond, is this something that is doable? It sort of seems like it's coming off as a mandate. Is this something that we can, given our policies, is this something that aligns with our policies? Black policy in particular.
Can you?
Oh, shoot, I forgot, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can translate what you were saying, but I need you to point out the article once again, because I was just able to pull up the bylaws.
Yes, Article 2A.
2A.
Yeah, number 7.
Number 7. La vicepresidenta está preguntando a la superintendente sobre el artículo número 2 y el punto número 7 que indica que 2 asientos al concilio de padres sería específicamente proveído para el BEC, al igual que el comité de padres para estudiantes de educación especial. ella le está haciendo la pregunta a la superintendente para saber si eso sería posible en los ojos de la superintendente.
So my response, Marisol, is that there are no issues with having seats, but we don't control that on neither PLAC nor CPAC.
La superintendente ha respondido que ella no tiene problema con esos asientos destacados para el Concilio de Padres Latinos. Sin embargo, el distrito no controla a esos dos grupos, así que esa conversación tiene que tomarse con esos dos grupos de representantes de padres.
I might add to that, when we look at Policy 1900, the section under school level parent organizations, item C, other parent organization, it reads, this policy does not supersede previous board memorandum of agreements and policies regarding specific parent groups such as the Bilingual Education Council. The board recognizes the existence and contribution of the Bilingual Council and supports its continued participation. However, it also, the same policy gives the district-wide parent organization the authority to exist and create their own bylaws. So just the way that the BEC bylaws are written, as you said, Commissioner Elliott, seems to, based on where the verbs are, usurp the authority of the parent organization, the PLAC, to receive members rather than the other way around.
Commissioner Paul, I'm going to remind you that I'm translating all of this, so I have the gist of what you have said, and I'll try to translate it in Spanish. So I'll ask that you please pause so that I can capture what you have said. La comisionada Powell está refiriéndose a la pólice 1900 que habla de las organizaciones de padres del distrito, y hay una sección que indica que al menos que haya otro acuerdo con la junta directiva, que el concilio de padres PLAC es el concilio reconocido, y que el pedido que ustedes han hecho en artículo 2, sección 7, prohíbe que ellos hagan esta determinación porque PLAC tiene sus propios bylaws. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to say bylaws in Spanish.
Estatus.
Gracias.
Commissioner White.
Yeah, I have, first of all, I want to thank the members of the Bilingual Council for their efforts at drafting these bylaws. Marisol, I'm trying to break it up. Do you want to?
El presidente White quiere darle las gracias al Concilio de Padres Latinos por creer estos.
Their efforts
Ahora se me olvidó la palabra, Angélica.
Their efforts are truly appreciated.
Sí.
I would, however, draw this group's attention to Article 2, Subdivision A, 8.
Of which bylaws? Of their own?
Of their bylaws, the bylaws that we're looking at.
Okay.
I'm sorry. May I just ask a brief question, Mr. White?
Sure.
I just think that this process is personally overwhelming for the parents. So I think maybe the best approach may be that we hear what you guys have to discuss, but if we can get these questions in writing.
Sure.
The BEC cabinet is meeting on Thursday, and then, because I don't think the parents or myself would be able to effectively respond without really doing our due diligence. So just to say that these bylaws are not bylaws that that this cabinet drafted. These are the bylaws that have been in place for many, many years. So that's just my one concern, that we would need to do some research as to what point in time the bylaws added certain language, and make sure that we're not stepping away or diluting anything from the original spirit of the MOU.
Yeah, let me just say, I agree with your proposal that we should be courteous and allow you all the opportunity to look at our questions and give you an opportunity to answer them. I think the reason why it came before you today is people felt anxious to look at the good work that you have done. And no one wanted anybody to have the impression that we weren't looking at your efforts. So that makes total sense to me. Does anybody have an objection to the questions that we have? I was just getting ready to ask a question about Article 2A8, but I can put that in a question form, and it can be delivered. You all can have an opportunity to respond. Does that make sense to all my colleagues?
Yes. In addition to...
Just let her translate that.
Lo que la Junta Directiva va a hacer es, van a revisar el documento que ustedes han proveído y van a escribir las preguntas que tienen y ustedes las van a discutir en su próxima reunión. Así, cualquier pregunta que ellos tienen sobre este documento, tienen la oportunidad ustedes de responder, porque hay algunas situaciones que hay preguntas que han existido por muchos años. Quizás es algo que nosotros también les podamos ayudar a determinar de dónde vinieron estas regulaciones.
Gracias, Marisol. But Commissioner Powell?
So you're recommending that we record our questions and concerns and get them back to BEC, so as we don't go through another back and forth. Could I suggest that superintendent identify some liaison persons? Dr. Black, did you have another name in mind?
Dr. Black and Acting General Counsel Adrian Neal would be helpful, yes.
Okay, if we can not only get those questions back to BEC, but also put them in touch with Dr. Black and Mr. Neal, we can be assured that a workable solution can be found by the next time it's presented to the board.
So, Marisol, would you just mind? Basically just agrees.
La superintendente ha ofrecido a la doctora Kathy Black y el abogado Adrian Neal para que se reúna con ustedes para poder tener la discusión y contestar las preguntas que la Junta va a proveerles.
Is that acceptable to all of this committee?
Y el comité está de acuerdo con esta determinación.
My only question, mi única pregunta is, and I think I've had this conversation with superintendent previously, if you guys are going to have legal representation involved, then we have to engage with some form of legal representation for the parents. So I don't know if there's a need to involve legal, and if there is, then I think you guys can give us the questions. We can review it on Thursday, and we are engaged with an attorney through Just Cause, so we should be able. I just think it's really intimidating for the parents to engage in that way when legal is involved, considering that we're trying to protect an MOU from 1972, and none of us were around at that time.
We don't need to do that. Dr. Black is fine. She can
Okay,
present
thank you. It just makes the whole process easier.
Would you translate that?
Yes. La superintendente ha indicado que no hay problema con solamente tener a la doctora Kathy Black presente. No hay necesidad de tener nuestro abogado. Y mi pensar es que su razonamiento es para asegurar que la información que sea compartida esté correcta.
Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
Just for a point of clarification, Mr. Neal is our acting general counsel. For those members of the bilingual council, I want you all to know, whether he's involved in these conversations or not, his role is to serve parents of this district. And so when Commissioner Powell was suggesting that he be part of these conversations, I'll stop.
No, you're going.
That it was done so that the bylaws that are drafted, he's not an advocate or an adversary to the parents. He's not a proponent for people sitting up here. His job is to make sure that the bylaws conform to the standard rules and requirements of bylaws generally. He's not like the traditional lawyer that you see in a courtroom. I just want people to understand that.
Thank you. El presidente White quiere que el concilio de padres sepa que el papel que el abogado del distrito está tomando en esta conversación es porque él representa los intereses de los padres y los estudiantes del distrito. Y solamente queremos asegurar que todos los regulamientos que estamos incluyendo en este documento sean eficaz con la ley y pasen con la ley que existe sobre estos tipos de documentos que proveen gobernamiento para la organización suya.
But if the superintendent has made the decision that he doesn't need to be a part of those conversations, that's fine. I just really think it's important that you understand that he, like Ms. Black, serves the citizens and parents and families of this district. So if he's looking at the bylaws, he's looking at how they can best serve this district, which includes you all, the bilingual council, and every parent and child who's a part of that council.
So, él solo quiere asegurar que ustedes sepan que la superintendente está de acuerdo que la doctora Black va a venir a representar al grupo para tener la discusión sobre este documento y cómo lo llevamos a cabo. I would also like to offer that if Dr. Black would like me to participate to serve as her translator, I would be happy to be there as well.
That would be terrific.
Y yo ofrecí participar con la doctora Black para asegurar que todo el mundo entienda lo que estamos haciendo y para traducir cualquier situación que ella necesite. I know, Angie, you're going to be there, but I volunteer to be there as well.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Marisol.
If I could add to that, Mr. Neal is also the administration's liaison to the policy committee. So one of the functions he can offer is to ensure that the bylaws are in keeping with other board policies. An example of the importance of that is that the Parent Advisory Council several years ago attempted to submit bylaws that actually ran counter to our policy 1900. So one of the ways that he can help us is to ensure that there are no conflicts between bylaws and existing policies, because any bylaws of committees and other and task forces and other such things that we might commission have to abide by our board policies, generally speaking.
Sí. Lo que la comisionada Paola estaba hablando es sobre el trabajo que nuestro abogado Neal va a conducir con la regulación de el grupo BEC y el grupo de padres del concilio PLAC, al igual que CPAC, para asegurar que todas las leyes que están creando cada grupo se puedan conformar unas a los otros. Pero eso es algo que se puede hacer después de la conversación que tendremos la semana que viene con la doctora Black.
Did you have more to add, Commissioner White?
Please, no.
No, I'm set.
Okay.
Gracias.
So is it by consensus we're all agreed to return this to BEC? Okay. Very good. That closes out this agenda item. Let me go back to board docs here. Okay. This takes us to School Board Policies Part 1 presentation. Madam Clerk, are you walking us through this?
Yes, ma'am. Give me
Okay.
1 second.
This presentation consists of 5 different policies, of which within board docs, we have a clean copy and a track changes copy of each. While she's pulling it up, I'll tell you that those include some very pro forma policies. 2100 is the school board legal status policy. 2111 is the board member authority policy. 2120.1 is electioneering in schools. 2160 is our code of ethics, which was recently reviewed already, and 2260 advisory bodies policy.
Okay, so I just pulled up the presentation. I can go backward. Let me just do that. Just as a reminder, I want to thank our staff who remains behind the scenes staff, Rahima Wynn, who helps put together the materials for policy, and so I am walking in her stead in presenting the materials tonight. So just as a reminder, in order to get in front of the policy committee, the subcommittee meets every other week in order to gather input for the purpose of the policies that are ahead of the board. These are board-related, board-specific policies. So the subcommittee did not necessarily meet on these, but typically these are the general contributors to the subcommittee. So just skipping right ahead to the school board part 1, which is in front of the board right now for discussion in policy committee. Commissioner Powell did name all the policies as you see on your screen. At this time, after the New York State School Boards Association went through the policies for compliance purposes, they did find that there are no recommended changes per se, apart from the board bylaws where they did recommend perhaps the consideration of separating it into individual items and issuing a similar handbook on those things. The consultants to the board policy 2280 has not yet been reviewed, and the school-based planning policy has not yet been reviewed. That is a policy that needs to gather input from the administration as well. So that is not in front of you at this time. So right now, Commissioner Powell, do you want to open the floor for any discussion on the policies?
Yeah, as you can see from the 5 items that I just outlined, there are no recommended changes. We do have a fair number of formatting changes throughout, as we have in all policies leading up to this point. But again, there really are no substantive changes being offered for these particular policies. So we don't necessarily need to take them one at a time. If you have no questions about it, we'll just skip to where the questions are. I do see a hand up, Commissioner LeBron.
Yes, I just have a question.
I can't hear you.
If we could just have the
You hear
volume
me?
up on the Zoom. Yeah, go ahead,
I can hear you
Commissioner
now.
LeBron.
Okay. I just have a question about 2100 and why that's even a policy when, like, that's a law. It's not clear to me why we would have a policy around this. I'm not around the board legal status. The board legal status is determined by the law, not by a board policy. And then also what's even written in there is a little odd. I'm trying to pull it up on my screen. It says, the legal status of the Board of Education is that of a corporate body established pursuant to the laws of New York State. Like, why would that be a policy? Again, if it's referencing New York State law. And then also that the board members are responsible for school district management and policy making. It doesn't even reference finance. I just think it's a weird policy to have. Like, why do we have this?
Well, there are two reasons.
That's my question.
Okay, so there's two reasons to have a board policy. One is for us to set parameters for the administration, and the other is to communicate to the broader public the environment in which we operate. And this particular policy, along with Policy 2111 and electioneering in schools as well, are there to communicate to the broader public the parameters in which the board itself has to operate. This is more just so that folks who are completely new to the district would understand that we're a 7-member board, that half of us are, or that 4 of us are elected on one cycle and 3 on another. And that's the long and the short of it.
I have one
Yes,
other
please.
point as well. The New York State School Board Association also does recommend policies. Some of these are procedural policies where they will dictate, you know, you should have a policy on this, and then they give us the language. So some of this, some of the policies that we do have on the docket are generic policies that across the board NISBA will recommend for boards. The ones like the school board legal status, that's coming from way, way, way back where they would have given us like a template, and it just is rolled over. So it really is up to the board to consider whether or not they want to have it, but generally a lot of these are just procedural policies that they recommend all boards to have.
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Clerk.
thank you, Kalia. I think that makes more sense. I just want to add, though, it's kind of nonsensical to have a policy when there's still the law, and we can still reiterate that we're a 7-member body and how we're elected without it actually being a policy and just a matter of fact and reference New York State law. But I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole and argue this. I just think it's not nonsensical, but thank you.
Well, and in point of fact, the question came up even at the subcommittee level of like, why do we have this? But in some cases, if it does no harm, then there's no harm in keeping it either. So, are there any other questions?
Well, Commissioner Powell, can I go to the advisory body's policy?
Certainly.
You know, we had a conversation earlier about it's the last paragraph, the board may accept, reject, or return recommendations for further study. One of the things I thought about, you know, like you see disclaimers that, you know, Channel 10, you know, is not responsible for such and such. Now, that may suffice, that last paragraph, it may suffice, but I was wondering if we received any information from an advisory body that, you know, we can sort of just disclaim. Now, maybe we cannot if, in fact, we're the ones who are appointing the advisory body. But I just thought I would bring that up just for discussion if that's something that we need to consider. Sure. But again, as I said, that last paragraph may suffice, but I just wanted to bring it to the table for discussion.
Right. Madam Clerk, if you want to go to the 2260 and pull that up for the audience to see. I might not be the best person to come up with an example, but let's look at the last appointed advisory body had to do with the code of conduct, and the vast majority of their recommendations were accepted, but they actually continued to do work, and some of the recommendations were modified along the way, right? This, first and foremost, this is a reminder that we are the decision-making body, and that our advisory bodies can do the grunt work of pouring through the research and what have you, but ultimately the decisions remain ours.
Yeah, let me just ask Interim Superintendent, Chief Counsel Neal about that. So that last statement, does that suffice with regard to my statement about, do we need some kind of disclaimer to say that we're not responsible for, you know, what this advisory body may come up with, or something, you know, as you've seen these disclaimers that hold organizations harmless. But this may suffice. I just wanted to check in with legal about that.
I believe so. To echo Commissioner Powell, ultimately, you know, authority to set district policy rests with the board. You know, the policy taken as a whole, you know, it makes that clear. And this paragraph is really just the kind of cherry on top. You know, so I concur with Commissioner Powell that this is sufficient. The board can accept, reject, return recommendations as we just did this, you know, this very meeting.
Right.
So I think it's sufficient.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, my only question is whether we want to advance these 5 to the board on a consent agenda, or whether we want to vote on each one of them separately.
I don't have a problem with voting on the consent agenda.
Are you making a motion to?
I make a motion for that, yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to advance all 5 of these policies to the full board. I guess I'll call for a vote now.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will take that offline and do the vote, because I set them up individually this time.
Sorry about that.
Because I thought you would do them individually, so.
Sometimes we do, right.
No worries, I can do that too. I can do
But
that too.
I do believe it was unanimous, though?
Yes,
Okay,
unanimous, 7-0.
Very good, thank you. Going back to the PowerPoint presentation, though, it did list a policy 2000 on the PowerPoint, and I wanted to let you know that as part of the work we're doing on the district goals with policy 0000, we are looking at adding a policy 2000 that we do not presently have, which will capture some of the work we did this summer, establishing board goals. So you'll see that in a future policy committee meeting. It was actually part of the subcommittee meeting we had today. So that's just an FYI. I believe that completes the policy committee agenda.
Yes, it does, and I just want to let folks know that these will be forwarded to the full board on December 23rd for the first reading, and then they'll be voted on finally after the second reading, and then the final vote for these board policies will be the February 17th business meeting,
Right.
and as outlined via policy 2410.
Well, we haven't actually. Policy 2410 did leave committee.
It did leave committee. It's going to be read for first reading as well in the November 23rd. We'll probably have to speed that one up so that we can have that in place first before we do the other ones.
We may have to ask for a waiver.
A waiver, right, for that one in particular. But it is slated for the December 23rd meeting.
Very good, okay. I'm not sure if I heard we were going into executive session once again, but if I could just ask folks to complete the survey before they leave the dais.
Okay, and then we need to get a motion to,
Adrian's gonna.
You're going to read the,
They need a motion to go into executive session
on the basis of,
on the basis of receiving advice from counsel and matters that are, on the basis of receiving advice from counsel.
so we will go into executive session on the basis of receiving advice from counsel. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
I'll move.
Can I get a second?
second.
No, second.
Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And so what we will do is that we will take the survey, the board survey, and then we will adjourn our meeting from after our executive session. So we will say from here. Okay. Good night.